Alright, this will be my Punisher Season 1 review. What I gotta say about this series, it wasn't quite what I expected, but I do really like the fact how in the comic books, Punisher was first introduced through Spider-Man before he got his own comic, before he became popular enough to get his own comic book. He was introduced through Spider-Man. And that's kind of what happened with Daredevil. He appeared on Daredevil, and his character was amazing enough to be granted his own show. So this whole show stands apart from the entire rest of the Netflix deal. And all the other shows, they've been getting canceled. But now it's Punisher. Who's to say what's going to happen to him? But let's jump into this review. Uh, so after the murder of his family, Frank Castle goes on a murderous rampage to punish the guilty. With his mission complete and his departure from Daredevil, Frank's wartime past comes back to haunt him. This has a really slow burn. Uh, I really enjoyed the Punisher running down guys though. In the opening of this episode, I really enjoyed the Punisher. He just runs down people with his van, sniping that. He snipes a guy that's getting a blowjob from a very far away rooftop, and killing that guy in the bathroom. That was hilarious. The reaction of the other two guys in the bathroom, thinking something else is going down in there. One, if I remember right, one of those guys says, "Get a room, you dirty bastards," because it sounds like somebody's gagging in there in the stall. That that was hilarious. Uh, but the burning of the vest, he burns the Punisher vest after this sort of montage of slaughtering people, and that was an absolute disappointment. He goes under a fake name and works on this construction site. But I really enjoyed the entire first episode, the personal isolation, the wanting to be left alone, and the the callbacks to his wife, his family, the kind of torment and pain, the self isolation, the just hammering on a wall around the clock, and the slaughter fest given to a lot of dickheads at the end of the episode. I really enjoyed that. Those guys had it coming, and it was brutal. But the Punisher, it explores the PTSD in the aftermath of war and loss through different perspectives. And there's a self help group that's associated with it. It takes a deep examination that can drag the show down a bit. But the depression and torment of the characters, especially Frank, it builds up an intensity. And when Frank loses his shit on here, he's intimidating and ultra brutal. And that's the kind of Punisher I signed up to see. Uh, Lewis, the younger vet, there's a younger vet, maybe in his mid 20s, or he's suffering from PTSD, and I really enjoyed his arc. The alienation he felt from his country and the citizens of it that he felt he sacrificed everything for. But considering the end result of that arc, it was a large waste of screen time. Uh, it took up quite it spread across a bunch of episodes. Uh, and that could have been greatly reduced. It probably could have been isolated to like a single episode. Uh, it led to some incredible action though, and that outed Frank to the cops, and the contrast between Frank and Lewis, how they cope, and the fact that one is a terrorist, like literally becomes a terrorist, and Frank is labeled a terrorist. I just thought it was really interesting. They suffer from the same thing really, but they go very different ways. And Curtis, the guy who kind of manages the self help group, he's a farmer armor but army buddy of Frank's. In the comics, Frank has to take him down. He seems like a very different character here, like very different. They even race changed him. Uh, but his character just seemed much more like good buddy to Frank instead of guy that ends up losing his shit and Frank has to take him down. But the overarching story is continued of conspiracy in the government, betrayal, and discovering those responsible for the death of Frank's family. That felt like a retreading of the origin we already got in Daredevil Season 2. Just extended, prolonged, and kind of dragged on. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the season, but I was hoping that Punisher would just get to the punishing and hunting down criminals and like you see in the opening. I really enjoyed all the flashbacks to Frank's old life, especially family life. My gripe is that it was difficult for Frank to be a family man after war, but I would have much preferred him to be a damn good family man because it kind of messes with the way that I viewed him with everything like that happened on Daredevil season 2. I mean, even with the loss of all he went through, I would have preferred him to be a damn good family man and told the loss of his family, and that being the defining factor that really, really just puts the nail in the coffin. We get a big comic book character in here though, Microchip, which is only called Micro in here, and he's a big departure from the comics. Having a family here, watching them from surveillance and isolated location, having having believed him to be dead, his family through Frank, he's kind of able to interact with him. He initially reaches out to Frank to team up with him in hopes of reuniting with his family eventually. But the stuff between them, the interactions, some of the stuff's funny. Like Frank really doesn't like Micro, and they butt heads a lot. And it's kind of interesting because Micro in the comics, that's like his man in the chair. His guy that alerts him about cops getting too hot and all kinds of interesting stuff. We do get the battle van in here, which is awesome. It's very iconic to the Punisher. Uh, this is really a character driven show, and some characters complement each other, others don't. Uh, Micro, I kind of felt like it would have been better if they stuck with the comic book version more so than what they have here. But the thing that stands out though is the contrast between Frank and others. As I said, the contrast between him and Lewis. You know, they both suffer from PTSD, but it's the way they cope with it, the way they handle it. They both do end up resorting to like extreme violence, but you know, one starts targeting innocent, and Frank he punishes the guilty. But Frank and Micro, I mean, there's a lot of contrast between them two. A lot of things that just a lot of similarities and differences. You know, one solves problems with his brains while Frank solves problems with a physical call to action. And Frank is confident, intense, impatient. Micro is cautious and nervous and doubtful. And Castle's family haunts him, while Micro, in a way, haunts his family. Now, Frank followed orders that led to devastation in his life, while Micro didn't follow orders and destroyed his life because of it. So, I mean, and Micro also wants his life back, and Frank has no life to get back to. There's a lot of things. It's like Micro's headed towards, he's trying to head toward life, and Frank's kind of just headed towards hell. Uh, it's really interesting the contrast in that, despite the fact that I would have preferred the comic book Micro to this. The contrast in that is really interesting. I do enjoy some of the headbutting, and there's a sandwich scene in there that's it's really funny. Uh, this season has an incredibly satisfying ending. The action scenes pitting Billy Russo, aka Jigsaw, and the Punisher against each other, they're really intense. Uh, and what he does to what he does to his face, how he makes him Jigsaw, that's a thing. That's the thing that happened in the comics. Punisher had a lot of great moments, hardcore, gritty action, some intense comms. It addressed some real life mental health mental health issues, and it has a lot of relatability for people who suffer from PTSD and soldiers. But it did drag a lot. The depressing nature of the damaged characters and slow burn in between like action, it it dragged a lot. Uh, but I do admire the brutal nature of the character, but you don't get as much as the ruthless Punisher as you did on Daredevil. The wild, loose cannon. Uh, the show's really kind of bogged down with too much political conspiracy and corrupt government stuff. And, the Lewis character, he has no relevance in the comics. And considering that his arc didn't really have a payoff, uh, that was a large waste of screen time. You know, Billy Russo here, he's pretty charismatic villain and stuff, but it takes too long for him to really come out as the villain. That's another thing that bothered me. Um, we got other characters in here, like, there's these other subplots and stuff with like the cops, and there's just I don't know. I really wanted a Punisher that was just like I would have much preferred a Punisher just going around and just slaughtering the bad guys and being isolated and having those flashbacks to his family, the times with his family, those beautiful like painful scenes. I would have much preferred that, and like him just mostly talking to Micro and Micro command like helping him from the chair, from the computer and stuff. And I feel like they really dragged this out. They really spread it thin. It's good, but it could have been a lot better. It's no Daredevil, but it is good. Uh, um, Agent Orange is also in here. And what Punisher does to that guy is pretty brutal. He was being pretty damn disrespectful, so that's a really enjoyable scene. The most enjoyable things in here for me were the violence, and some people are gonna be like, "Oh, but whatever, man. It's the Punisher. That's what we're here for, to see him punish the guilty." And hopefully, we get a lot more of that in season two. And now, because it feels like they redid the origin, like they set him up perfectly on Daredevil season two, and wrapped all that up pretty nicely, and they had him you know, exit wearing the Punisher attire. And that's where I was hoping to pick up him just going across country, slaughtering people, punishing the guilty, maybe teaming up with Micro, creating Jigsaw. Uh, and then you have that as their overall villain. But, uh, I don't know, man. It's really slow burn. But a good one. I mean, a lot of action. Jon Bernthal, great Punisher, so much intensity in his acting. the rage, the screams, the violence, and the knockout, drag out brutality and fights. It's very gritty, very bloody, very brutal. Uh, so the action in here is really solid, and the callbacks to Frank's, family, the little moments, all those are really nice and gripping. I'm gonna give Punisher an 8 out of 10 though, because it had a really slow burn, but really hoping next season will be a lot better. Still, great show, incredibly fantastic. Jon Bernthal is amazing, intensely amazing. 8 out of 10, and you know, like, subscribe, check out my other videos. I will be doing a season 2 review soon because that comes out on the 18th. Uh, if you would like to support my channel, check out my GoFundMe, check out my PayPal. Other than that, stay awesome. Rock on.